Welcome to the Self-Storage Report. I'm your host, Chris Berg, otherwise known as your AI storage guy. Right, Thad? You might talk
I
about
love it.
this
I love it. I haven't
yesterday.
stopped. It goes over and over in my head
You
ever
like
since I
the
first heard
best,
it.
AI storage guy, your AI storage guy. We'll see how this whole thing plays out. Also do land acquisition with Abernathy Holdings. We're looking for some great dirt in the great state of California. Joining me today, my co-host, the one and only Rad Thad.
That's
Everyone's got
great.
to call you Rad Thad, man. Thaddeus Campbell with S3 Partners, obviously the co-host here, hosts some other podcasts as well. Thaddeus Campbell. Did you go to prep school, bro?
You know what? It's funny you say that. Shout out to Eagle Brook and St. George's from 6th grade through 12th grade.
Wait, did you really went to prep
I
school?
really went to boarding school, my friend. I will say as an addendum that I was a day student at boarding school. I was that guy. I was there on an academic scholarship. I was not there because of any other reason. But yes, I am a product of boarding school.
I mean, you had to have, like, when I was thinking this morning, is I, I have an interview. I'm like, Thaddeus, that is like just such a great
You know
prep
what's
school. Like,
great?
right now, you know what? From now on, will you do the podcast with like just a smoking pipe and just,
I
I'm
need a
Thaddeus
monocle. You
Campbell.
take the
Welcome to the
glasses off.
show.
That's great.
No, you need the glasses and like a bunch of books around you to just
Oh, I love it.
welcome
I
to the
love it.
storage report.
That's great. There, you just made my day. Making me laugh right off for the jump. Chris, you weren't here last week, and we're going to talk a bunch about that because you were at CSSA in Newport Beach. I can't even begin to tell you how jealous I am that I came to California like right after the event ended, and if I'd known about it, I'd have been there with you. But last week we made the announcement, and now fully on board. Really happy to welcome as our data partner the folks at Tract IQ. Noah Starr is going to be appearing on the show at least once a month, so we're very excited, and he'll make his first appearance on the show in 2 weeks, the first Thursday in August. God, is it crazy? I almost said May. I feel like we
Wow.
just started this year, right? It's going to be August in another week or so. But really excited. I know I've gotten a chance to, it seems like every single person I've seen since last week was at the CSSA show. I obviously can't say anything about it because I wasn't there, but really looking forward to what you heard there and what came out of that show, Chris.
Oh, I can't wait to share. I'm going to tell you the number one thing I learned last week at CSSA, which I think is going to surprise you. So I'll invite you to guess what that is here in just a moment. Also, I'm going to share with you a great thesis on why Thaddeus and I are long self-storage. Some really, I think, incredible opportunities over the next 5 to 10 years there. You've got a lawsuit you want to talk about. You're going to tie in some feasibility studies and much, much more. So I want to show you, I mean, the CSA event, as always, it is an epic event. Great people are there. You got top CEOs doing roundtables. I mean, really, really well-known people in the industry. So there's a lot to learn. But there's one thing that really stood out. So what do you think is the number one thing I learned at CSSA last week?
I mean, you've got me for a loop. I mean, the thing that I keep hearing over and over again is the significant downturn in ground up development.
I think the number one thing I learned is just how much they hate developers.
Oh, that's great.
No, and I say that obviously in jest, but there was a great, robust conversation with top CEOs from the industry. I mean, CEO of Extra Space, CEO of Smart Stop, William Warren Group, Castor Group. So top CEOs having this conversation. And obviously there was a big piece about the ECRIs and the pricing and what's happening right now and is how dynamic it is in the space. And Michael Schwartz, do you know Michael Schwartz from Smart
Do
Stop?
not actually.
He's fantastic. I really, really like him. So this big dialogue is going on and things were, I wouldn't say they're chippy, but there was a little bit of tension in the room about ECRIs and, pricing and where things are at. Michael Schwartz is like, look, you know what? I think you all are, onto something here. I appreciate it, but I just disagree. I think we just overbuilt. We killed the golden goose. We put too much supply online, and that's the problem. And I think he summed it up really, really succinctly, really simply, really easily. So again, not that they hate development, but you can tell it's kind of like, hey guys, can we just be a little bit smarter about this so I can keep my pricing where I want it?
I,
What are your
I
thoughts
think
on that?
that's fascinating. I had Maurice Pagoda of the Pagoda Goes. We've put the Pagoda companies on my podcast, Stories Behind the Door, a couple weeks ago, and blew my mind. He was developing in the 80s and 90s in Michigan. He's like, look, if there was 2 square foot per capita, I wouldn't develop in the market. I mean, think about that right now. You literally would not be able to build a self-storage facility in any top 50 MSA if you were looking for any top 100 probably, if you're looking for 2 square foot or lower, and you have any type of a demographic, base as far as what you wanted for population in that 3 mile radius. So this idea that, we're overbuilt we're looking at sites now, and we'll see a site with 10, 11, 12 in Florida or some other places and be like, can we can we make an argument to do it anyway? So yeah, I mean, I think a massive problem. One, I think we're going to see a fix present itself over the next couple of years. I know we've talked about this. I've been hanging around Steve Ross. Shameless plug for the Stories Behind the Door podcast. He'll be my guest tomorrow. I'm going to air that on LinkedIn Live at noon Eastern time. Steve Ross has been doing feasibility studies, 1 o'clock Eastern time. Steve Ross has been doing feasibility studies since the 90s. He was a vice president at Extra Space when they had 9 stores. Think about that for a second, right? He was a vice president at Extra Space when they had 9 facilities, and he started doing in-house feasibilities back then. Obviously been on his own for about 20 years doing feasibilities. In his career, north of 85% of the feasibilities he would do have been self-storage. He said in the last year, it's been less than 25%. He is doing so much more boat and RV. He's doing a lot of flex, shameless plug for the small bay flex side, which we're diving into at S3 Partners. But less than 25% of the feasibilities he's performing are in storage. Very reflective. I touched last week while you were at the CSSA event on Thursday. Radius Plus has they give data on current construction. There's only like 560 self-storage facilities under construction right now. 12-month cycle to finish a ground up, right? So figure there's not going to be more than those 568 actually open their doors in the next 12 months. And offset that with the last 2 years where there's been over 2,500 facilities open their doors. So, figure 1,250 to 1,300 per year that have opened each of the last 2 years. By the way, records. Now we're going to be down in the 500, 600. I mean, a really drastic shift in ground up construction.
Yeah, so I think there's really some intriguing things, and that's why I said a moment ago too. There's a thesis I want to share with you, and you and I talked a little bit about why I think it is okay to be long self-storage, and there's really some good tailwinds for the self-storage industry that are playing out in housing and whatnot. I think that's why it's been such a challenge. You had so much building take place. Nobody's moving because there's 3% rate, so there's just not a lot of demand, if you will. So with that being said, I think the other couple of things that were really intriguing from last week at the CSSA, as I spoke to a couple of really prominent brokers, one of them said to me that he goes, he's been doing this now for I think 20, 24 years. He's like, this is the worst it's been in 20 years because I've never seen it worse in 20 years. So that was one comment from a gentleman who's been in the business for a long time. Another comment from a long time, I mean, more than probably 20, 25 years in the business, said, the one thing about the great financial crisis, it was like we fell off a cliff. You knew it. You fell off a cliff. It was ugly. You just kind of had to deal with it. He goes, right now, I feel like I'm being drugged through broken glass. Like it's just so painful. It's been taking so long. And I was like, oh, so it's not good. He's like, it's terrible. He's like, it's been just such a challenge. So I thought that was really interesting to hear. Now, again, the positive, you see sales are up in Q1 of 2025. I think you and I have seen that the rates have bottomed out probably Q4 of 24. But also like Joe Margolis from Extra Space said last week, look, the thing about storage, it goes down really, really slow, and it's going to go back up really, really slow. So don't expect this, huge dynamic change in rates. Although I will say, my team and I were looking at a site in Upland, California this week. Probably a year ago, give or take, a month or two, rates were about $150, $153 for a 10 by 10. Today, this month, July 2025, what would you guess the rate was at for that same 10 by 10?
In California?
In Upland, California, 153 about a year, 14 months ago.
210?
235.
Wow.
So, I mean, that to me is a very dramatic uptick in a rate, right?
I was thinking about that actually. We're looking at a project in Punta Gorda, Florida, which got put under contract, or the land was bought a couple years ago, and the rates were strongly in the twos. Dropped all the way to 120. I just checked it a week ago. It's back up to 180. I mean, so we're seeing some of that recovery, definitely. And by the way, that Punta Gorda market, the saturation level is not low. right? Now, Florida is really hard because you have so many people that are there but don't really claim residence there in a lot of cases. So it's sometimes hard to really, frame what that saturation number looks like because obviously they base it on the people who are actual residents. They don't necessarily account for all the homes of people that are going down for the winter. That being said, we're starting to see in some markets where some of that, especially markets that repressed greatly, and I think this goes to a deeper conversation about the pricing models and how the algorithms go to pricing. I was hearing this as I've been at the S3 meetings all week and exposed to some of the high level people in our industry. There's very clear cut points in the occupancy level of a facility where the pricing model will change dramatically. If you go from 92% to 88%, Big John Sudarth, who's with Buchanan Street Partners now, was a member of the StoreQuest team, the William Warren Group, for many, many years. He was talking about this, like the difference between 92% and 92% occupancy, you are able to demand the price you want. At 88% occupancy, you're chasing rate. And we've seen that over the last couple of years. It doesn't seem like a huge difference in occupancy, but post-COVID, as we came down from those mid-90s occupancies and got into the high 80s again, the algorithms really changed what management were doing to drive occupancy, and it repressed rates dramatically in a lot of markets, which
Well, I think
makes sense why we're seeing such a pullback in ground-up development now because you can't model a pro forma.
exactly. You can't. But what's really fascinating, I want to dive in a little more of the weeds here on this site in Upland, is that, we were really looking at it before I was part of the team. They were really looking at it, I would say 3 to 4 years ago. And so we had public underwrite it, and they underwrote it at 230, which looked good, sounded good, made sense at the time. But then all of a sudden you go back, like I said, 12 to 18 months ago, and you're at 150. You're like, man, if I would have underwritten at 230, like I'm underwater and done. It did sell. It did transact recently, fairly recently. A lot of people in the business, insiders were like, man, I think, and I don't want to call anybody out, but some people maybe had suggested that somebody had overpaid for it. Well, now you look at it and go, and they might end up looking like geniuses, right? Hey, now it's 230 in July 2025. I don't know what they underwrote it at inside their own team, but they might come back and be like, see how, prescient we were on where things were going at this particular site. So
Of course.
I share all that because I think it's really fascinating to try to underwrite developments when really you're not going up for another 4 to 5 years, maybe even more in California.
So this makes me think of something that, we've talked about the thesis of consolidation and self-storage and how I truly believe it's going to get more and more consolidated very rapidly now. And you talk about that site, someone buys a site, and everyone thinks they bought it overpriced. The question is, what money did they use to buy it, right? And this is why I think we're going to see a consolidation. If Public Storage or U-Haul or Extra Space or Cube, some of the really large private equity groups, if they go buy a piece of land and they're using their own money, and there's no interest on that money buying that land, very different prospect than some of the merchant developers that go and raise LP money and they've got an 8 pref or a 10 pref to their LPs. Okay, if I go buy a piece of land for $2 million and I got to sit on it for 4 years, it's costing me $200,000 a year in interest. All of a sudden, 4 years later, I'm 2.8 million into that land. It's a very different feeling than if some of those larger operators bought it themselves and like they're using money that they have sitting there. There's not a pref rolling up. So one of the reasons that I think right now you're going to see the big boys be able to do deals that other people can't.
Agree with you. And yeah, you got to think about it. If you're a public company, right? Like I've got to make sure I'm getting the right FFO per share. So, I mean, that's one of the things where you've got to be a great capital allocator where you can't just go and
100%.
overpay for dirt and then think you're going to
100%.
be okay. So, I mean,
Yeah, they still
there
want
are
to show return.
strategies there that you got to be, thinking about and concerned about. But that brings me to a really important point, again, to go back to CSSA, where person there from Talinvest talked about now they're doing some bridge to bridge loans. So it's not like just a bridge loan, it's a bridge to bridge. And then Michael Schwartz from SmartStop stepped up and said, I don't know if you know, but he just took SmartStop public.
I did
And
know.
so with that, what he was able to do is he went out and got $500 million and he called them maple bonds at like 3.85%.
Wow.
And like the CEO of William Warren Group said, "Hey, if Mike can go play this game at 3.85, like I can't play the same game." And then Mike was like, "Did I just hear bridge to bridge? I might get in the lending business at 3.85." But I mean, that's a lot of capital, right? At 3.85.
It goes to a thesis in my former job at Safe Storage USA. We were going out of our minds watching transactions in storage in the five caps where our access to capital was at a fixed 6.5. How can we buy something at such negative leverage? Well, now you got SmartStop with $500 million at 3 point. Of course, they could pay a 5.5 cap. They've got a 2 bip spread on their purchase price, right? So explains a lot. And again, concretes that theory that we've talked about that, the big boys are going to be able to consolidate that much quicker.
Yes. One other thing, just to speak to what you're saying as far as the decrease and what's going on, just as far as activity, another great guest was part of the capital markets roundtable, and she talked about how Crow Holdings over the last, it was 9 years, had done roughly like 85 deals, right?
Yep.
But in the last 2 years, they've done just four. So I want to presence that for 7 years, they were averaging, 10 deals a year, kind of clipping along. And then the last two, it's been four. They've averaged two a year, which I think speaks volumes to what you're suggesting around feasibilities, what we're saying about, hey, there's going to be a dramatic decrease in development taking place for the next few years, which again, I think bodes well for people that just keep kind of slogging along, trying to, dig in some dirt, which is exactly what we're doing just every day and going, hey, look, we know it's going to be a slog for a little bit, but we're trying to get much more focused, like a rifle rather than a shotgun, and go, hey, this is a piece of dirt that we think we can translate into a really, really valuable asset.
Yeah, I think that you're on point completely. And I think we're coming to this point in this. We've talked about the real estate cycle a ton, and hard not to keep talking about it. But we're coming to a place where there's going to be some type of to the point of Crow Holdings going from 8 to 10 a year to 4, with the amount of money that they have, are still able to only able to. I'm having a hard time talking. I'll blame it on the thin air. I'm sitting in Colorado. I'm sitting at an airport in Colorado. In case you wondered why I'm not in my house with the little green fake plant sitting behind me, I'm at the S3 Partners, our S3 Partners yearly meeting. So I'm at Centennial Airport, and the backdrop was just too cool not to show. But going back to my point, somebody with that much money, and they're only able to deploy, 20% of what they've been deploying year over year. Are we coming to this point in the process? And I talked about, even though maybe a SmartStop is able to buy at a positive spread, we've seen a lot of I was talking to Barry Sherman, and there was a transaction that a friend of his did lately, sold a self-storage facility in the high 3 caps, like in 2025. Like there's got to be a correction here at some point. I think we're speeding towards that in a way that a lot of this data that we're starting to see. I know you've shown the housing market stocks lately, and how that historical dip is starting to take off. But one of the precursors of an economic downturn always is when people start banking on growth of future value to buy something, as opposed to the positive cash flow that it might create. It tends to be a precursor that we're late in the growth trend, and we're headed to a downturn in the economy. Hate to say that, and we've been saying that for weeks now, but there's so much data that I'm hearing that starts to make perfect sense as you start to look at it through the lens of an 18.6 year real estate cycle.
By the way, can you just do every show from that same location? I mean, that background is like, is that a green
I don't
screen
know
or
if
what?
Gary's willing to put me up in a hotel room every week for the rest of the year, but there hasn't been a plane go by in a second, but we're at a private airport. People don't know I
It
work with
is.
S3 Partners, which is Barry Sherman, but Barry also is a principal in Business Aviation Group, builds hangars and FBOs, fixed base of operation. I learned that new today. Basically private airports around the country. So kind of cool to get to go hang out at a private airport.
Two more things I want to share, and then I want to jump into this thesis around why people should be long self-storage is one, I think also to speak just to Crow Holdings, as you mentioned, you have one point of view on it. I think another perspective is just to shows how disciplined they are as investors, right? Like, hey, if it's not meeting a certain
100%.
IRR, we're not going to pull the trigger on this deal because we got to make sure that we're going to give ourselves the correct margin of safety to get the right returns for our investors. Secondly, and we probably should have done this earlier. You and I were having such great kind of back and forth. I do want to give a big shout out to Toy Storage Nation, to you for helping me get there, and to Troy and Amy Bix. I think they just put on a fantastic event, and so I want to give you a chance just to comment on that because you spoke there, had a chance to talk about what we were doing with Small Bay Flex, and I just thought it was a really, really well done event.
First of all, I'm a jerk, and I've admitted this to Chris. I told Chris it started at 10 a.m. and it started at 8 a.m. And at 10 a.m. we are on the road going to do a site visit at a boat and
Don't even
RV
bring me
storage
back to
facility.
that memory,
So
man.
I apologize for that live on air, mea culpa. We were at this boat and RV facility in Corona, California. $995 for an 85-foot drive-through canopied RV storage spot. I think a 45-foot was like 495. So listen, there's some locations around the country where if you can get a piece of dirt for boat and RV storage, really, really strong returns. Of course, the challenge of boat and RV storage is there is not the data available that there is in self-storage, which is why I think that the events that Amy and Troy Bix are hosting for Toy Storage Nation are so important. You
Yeah.
have to be able to go find somebody who's been there and done that. Hey, they've built canopy in that area of the country because every area is different, right? Your site work's going to be different depending on the dirt you're building on. And to be able to go in that room and have people there that have actually been building boat and RV for 15, 20 years and be able to connect with them, to be able to pick their brain and understand they do a fantastic job of bringing people together. And I think right now, going back to what I said with Steve Ross, right? He's over 50% of his feasibility studies he's doing right now are boat and RV storage, which is really hard to believe for me, who got into the industry in 2021 when self-storage was booming and Steve Ross was doing like 99% of his feasibilities on self-storage because you could throw a dart at the map and very likely figure out a way to pencil a self-storage project there. A big shift in boat and RV is helping, and it's helping keep some people very much afloat.
All right, I want to jump into our thesis here.
Before you do that, I don't mean to
Yeah.
interject with you. And when Chris and I talk privately, I just wanted everyone to know one of the things he says to me all the time is let me finish because I'm horrible at interrupting. But I want to talk about the dinner we had at Toy Storage Nation for a second, if you don't mind.
Let me-
Get rid of your screen share for a
yeah.
second. I just want to say thank you. Chris and I went to dinner, and I'm going to explain this to people. And Chris is authentically Christian, which I love. You guys that follow me on LinkedIn know I talk about it a lot. And we had a dinner, and I want to encourage you folks out there based on what we did. We spent the dinner talking and getting to know each other, but we were talking about what's really going on in our lives. And we were pulling up scripture throughout dinner and going into the Bible to really talk about some of these challenges that we're facing in our life and, recognizing that the answer is in the Bible. It's there. Like if you want to find an answer, go read scripture. You're going to find that answer. Now, I get it. That's not everyone's cup of tea. Okay. But for those of you guys who are out there, I just wanted to say thank you to Chris. And I wanted to do it live while we're on the self-storage report because listen, I'm 51 years old. A lot of people go through midlife crisis. We as men, especially born in the time we were born, and we talked about this in our dinner, we didn't always get a lot of leadership on how to lead a family, how to be a husband, how to be a father. We didn't get a lot of training on how to do that from our parents. And so to sit down and spend 2.5, 3 hours at dinner with you, enjoying a great meal, admittedly, but amazing company, just wanted to say how grateful I am to you that we were able to have such an important conversation.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate you bringing it up here on the show and just to share that, it's just, there's been a lot going on in my life as of late, and the Lord's really put on my heart about, what's going on with men. And you look at especially young men in our society today, and there's some real challenges out there that this probably isn't the time to talk about, but we will. But it was really nice to, with you, we had a really authentic, just great conversation earlier that day, even at CSSA. Don't want to call anybody out, but this gentleman and I just had a great, like, hey, what's going on in your marriage? What's going on with your family? What are the challenges you're dealing with? And it's just such a rare thing because most men are trying to, do the whole ego thing and whatnot. So it was nice to just, you and I kind of shed that away and go, hey, here's what's going on in life. And there's some really good things, but there's also some really challenging things. And to go to the word about that was just awesome. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you. And I'm going to let you talk now for a while without you having to say, let me finish.
All right, so I want to get into this, and you mentioned about the home builders. So D.R. Horton had their earnings call. I think it was Tuesday. And they actually had a big jump, Thad. So coming out, Wednesday out of the gates, they had a big jump in their stock price, which kind of surprising if you actually listen to the call. There wasn't anything like, oh my gosh, 2026 is going to be amazing. In fact, you're going to hear a little bit more why in a moment. But to go back to your 18.6-year real estate cycle, we talked about this before. Typically, what you're going to see in the housing stocks is they're going to peak, which they did in September of 2000. I'm going to say 2024. We'll see if that bears out to be true or not. Then they drop off pretty dramatically. But then there's like a second kind of run up where they try to hit another high. They don't get there, and then it starts to fall off. And then with that second time, which I don't know if we're there yet, but that second time is when you know, like, okay, the land prices are starting to get to go down, which they talked about within this call a little bit. And now you can see the economy starting to have many more cracks than maybe we anticipated. We'll talk more about this in some other calls, but I do want to play this for you because everything I'm sharing here ties into this thesis around why I'm very, very bullish on self-storage. A couple things is one, millennials right now are the biggest user of self-storage, and millennials have got a long time to build a relationship with self-storage and a long time to have more disposable income to go buy their toys that they're going to have to store. And the reason I say have to store is largely because of what you're going to hear in this clip and some of the data I'm going to share with you. So let's listen to this clip, and then we can discuss your thoughts on the thesis, because there, as we all know, many millennials just cannot afford a home these days. So here's what a large percentage of these major home builders are doing to try to solve that problem, if you will, for themselves and obviously for their customer.
What about efforts to drive greater affordability, such as smaller lot sizes or smaller floor plans? Any initiatives on that front?
I think both of those, Alex. You can look at our average square footage, and it's declined consistently over really the last 24 months. I would expect that to continue some. And the key to affordability in this country is to provide a smaller home site with a smaller home that meets the ability of our buyers to close on their home and meets a monthly payment that fits what they're looking for. We just need a little extra help from local governments to allow us to achieve that really across the U.S., but that's an opportunity that we continue to explore every day.
Our average square footage on homes closed was 1,956, which was down 1% from a year ago, which has been just a very gradual decline. But we're down in the last 5 years, a high single-digit percentage on our average square footage. So we expect that just gradual trend of the average shrinking to continue.
Expecting to continue high single digits decline in square footage over the last 5 years. Look, doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what they're saying, right? So your thoughts on that, Thad?
I think that, you put out an amazing report that you send out, a newsletter that you send out all the time. And I actually read through it. I will admit, I read Chris's newsletter as I was traveling around Colorado. D.R. Horton is not the only home builder that's doing this. And in fact, I think there's a newer home builder coming into the section where they're targeting like 900 to 1,000 square foot houses. It's really the only option, right? What's Sam Zell's wall say? What did it always say? Supply and demand, right? There is a demand for housing. There is not a supply of available housing that people can afford to buy. We talked a few weeks ago about the median income in the U.S. versus the price point of the home builders. And there's like a $200,000 difference in the average price point of the big home builders versus the median income of the U.S. Not surprising to see that they're starting to really adjust, and that where the demand is and the price point that the demand can afford, they're going to start to target supply to get to that place.
First off, thank you for reading the newsletter. I appreciate that. If you want to go and check it out, we're also posting this typically on LinkedIn, so you can follow me on LinkedIn to get this, what I would say is really great information, because I think the thesis is stronger. This is Washington Post, less money, less house. You can see here from the National Association of Home Builders, the decline since 2015 that's taking place. And obviously the thesis then for you and I being in storage is, hey, people aren't going to stop buying things. But they just want to get in a house that's going to be smaller. And we've talked about this before, where millennials compared to boomers, like boomers go to their storage site maybe once or twice a year. Millennials use this thing like an extra garage. And so I think it's going to really bode well as you've got smaller homes. Millennials are going to soon have more disposable income because they're buying Bitcoin. Just a joke. More disposable income. And they're going to go out and buy stuff. And they're going to have a place that they're going to need to store that. And so you can see the trend here, as Thad just mentioned, D.R. Horton, Lennar, Meritage Homes, Toll Brothers, all looking at building smaller homes because that's the only way they're going to continue to sell their product. How do I get and do what they need to do to obviously make their shareholders happy. So again, that's the thesis there is smaller footprint for the home, more stuff. They're going to need to store it. That's going to bode well for demand, especially right now when you've got, like we've just talked about for the last 20 minutes, less supply coming online. I think you're going to see those prices start to go up as far as rates.
Yeah, I agree with you and think that, it's been a long time coming. I used to always laugh. People would complain about the price of homes, and I would look at, like, if you look at the housing developments that were built in the 1950s and what the houses looked like, it was an 800 square foot house with a thin kitchen, a living room, 2 bedrooms, small bathroom, right? 1 bathroom. There could be 4 kids living in that house, right? And that's what the house was. And, as you went through the 80s into the 90s, especially the early aughts and the 2000s, the McMansions became the thing. And so, yeah, you were paying a higher percentage of your income for the house, but you were paying for a 2,400 or a 2,800 square foot house instead of an 800 square foot house. So it made sense that you were paying a higher percentage. What was interesting is we saw a decline in the average person per home over that time too. We got spoiled a little bit, right? We were living in bigger spaces and having more space to each person. And it's like anything else. There's always going to come a time where the role has to turn. And now we're seeing this shared by the home builders that, expect to see a continued gradual reduction in the size of the houses that are being built. There's no other way to get to an affordable price. Unless the Fed goes and makes the Fed rate 0 again, which I don't foresee happening anytime in the near future. Quite frankly, I hope it doesn't happen again because the long-term negative ramifications honestly can be way worse than, the short-term improvements. To your point earlier about self-storage being a long-term play, what happens to self-storage with millennials and Gen Z who are going to very quickly outpace millennials as the biggest user as they come into the fold, as the whole generation, Gen Z, gets to adulthood and starts using self-storage. If they're living in 900, 1,500 square foot houses instead of 1,500 or 2,500 square foot houses, it only makes the long-term prognosis for self-storage that much better. Because there's one thing we really understand after a couple hundred years of the United States, people like their things. They like to have stuff.
Very true. I mean, again, not to get too outside the box, but I just want to throw this out there, is that does there come a time where people don't need garages? And what I mean is we know the autonomous thing is coming, right? So you're going to basically just, hey, I need my Tesla to show up, bada bing, bada boom, it shows up. So that might be a way to help mitigate some of that. Right now, you don't need a garage. You go and use that as part of your living space, and that may help affordability as well. So
listen, on top of being able to call your car, it's a price thing for the home builders. If I don't need that extra couple square feet of land to build the garage, even though the garage tends to be a little cheaper per square foot to build, look, if I can save the build cost and I can save the land cost and build maybe 2 or 3 extra houses per development because I don't need that spot for the garage in the house, yeah, of course, that's only going to increase. And of course, we know HOAs are becoming much more common, where you're having preclusions on keeping stuff on your site. So there's no reason to feel like long-term self-storage isn't in a great place. I want to go back to something you said earlier about one of the brokers saying they feel like they're being dragged through the glass as opposed to the precipitous cliff, which I can understand. It's more like a prolonged negative than it is a sharp negative. But here's the thing. All in all, self-storage is still doing pretty good relative to what it could be, what a lot of other industries are doing, right? Like if you're going to go through a prolonged period of pain, I think you'd rather go through it in self-storage. I'm fascinated by this fact. We still have not seen any fire sales of any really big, a little bit on the development site side, some guys that bought pieces of land a couple years ago, where we're starting to see those properties come on the market for significantly lower cost. But as far as self-storage that's actually been built, development projects that we might look at and say, man, that maybe shouldn't have been. We haven't seen them being sold at fire sale prices yet.
We haven't. And again, I just want to remind everybody that that was part of the CSSA conversation. When I heard bridge to bridge loan, I was like, okay, some people are starting to feel the pain. And that's exactly where Michael Schwartz is like, that's why I got 500 million at 3.85. I see there's going to be opportunity
Yeah, it's
coming. And he's like, I would rather be prepared today for that opportunity than having to go trying to find capital to deploy when it's upon us. So I think that's going to be intriguing. And look, since you and I talk about the real estate cycle, I know you mentioned we're probably not going to see 0% rates anytime soon. Just want to remind everybody, today is a day Trump is at the Federal Reserve. You know, he's in Powell's ear. The first term of Trump, if you remember, he wanted negative rates. I'm not saying we're going there. All I'm saying is that the next person that takes over in May is going to be very dovish. May not be 0, may not be negative, but it definitely is not going to be 3 or 4. I can tell you that 1,000%. So
we're
we'll see.
going to have to watch this one. We're a little bit on opposing sides of this view. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, which is
I think
okay.
that's going to be part of the catalyst that everyone's going to flood in. And as you know, in the real estate cycle, when everybody's in, that's when you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to just gladly step out of the boat, realign some of my assets here, and get ready to deploy some capital. So,
thank you, man, so much for having such great information. Your preparation and your in-depth look at what's going on is unparalleled, which is why we call him the AI storage guy, because he's utilizing the tools available to keep himself informed, which is awesome.
Bro, this is incredible how you work. First off, thank you for
how well did I just do that? This was not a planned segue. Not planned. We do not have a rundown. We don't have a production script. We pretty well do this off the cuff. I did that about as well as you could. I'm going to pat myself. If my arm could reach behind me, I'd pat myself on the back.
I'm giving you a virtual pat on the back, and you absolutely crushed that. I've had this been sitting on my screen now for the last couple of minutes because I wanted to bring this up, and then you just went, "Yeah, you're the AI storage guy." I'm like, "Oh, that was perfect. Let's go." So
love it.
What I did want to bring up, and I wanted
bright red.
I wanted to share this with you is that as I was digging for dirt, I found a site that Trojan Storage is doing in a really great area. It's going to be a great asset.
Shocking from Trojan Storage.
Dude, they've got some great assets.
Brett Henry and Lauren Feeney, their acquisitions head.
Yes. But to the point where I was like, I want to find out like what it really took to get this asset online, like what it took for them to really get this thing through entitlements and all that kind of stuff. So being the AI storage guy, went into ChatGPT, went into deep research, gave it some prompts. I just want to share with you and everybody else what came up here, but also to share with people just how difficult it is to build in California. So here's the address. And by the way, I did email Lauren. She said, hey, there's a few things in this report that aren't totally accurate, but pretty much spot on. Just so if there are some things that aren't true, it's ChatGPT. It is what it is. But
he is the AI storage guy, but trust but verify. I love it.
Exactly. Thank you. But check this out, dude. Entitlements and planning approvals. 2016. 2016. And I'm going to let this sit for a minute because I'm going to bring up my Google Earth as well to show people something.
Real estate is a get rich slow game, right? The people that rush to get rich in real estate go broke. Brett Henry is a genius. I have so much respect for that guy. And of course, Lauren Feeney, our very close friend, is likewise incredibly intelligent, but they understand the long-term play.
Yeah. Well, and I think, again, if you talk to Brett, he's like, look, I want hard to build sites. So I think what's important for people to realize, they had to go through a rezone here. This was residential. They went through a general plan amendment. I mean, he said, I'm going to go beat my head against the wall because that's how much I believe, in this asset or this location. And so they got it rezoned. Then eventually they ended up taking it from, I think it was a certain amount. They had to change it again because they wanted to build a bigger site. I think it was 100,000 initially. Then they wanted to do like 168. So you can see just how arduous this process has been from 2016 all the way until it starts to give me kind of a rundown here. With 2016, 21, they actually closed on the deal. I don't know if those numbers are accurate, but pretty close. Here there's a hearing, fall of 2023, building application in 20. So that's 8 years later. You get your building permit. I mean,
you throw in there that you got a 3-year lease up projection that you're putting in there. You've got, nearly 10 years to get to CO. the patience and the ability to deal with hurdles. Most people don't even want to read the ChatGPT script that you just pulled up, let alone go through, 10 plus years of development pipeline to get their project profitable.
Well, now watch this. So think about where we're at. We're in August of 2025. This is the location of the site. So as you can see, great, right up the freeway here, all that kind of stuff. But what I really want to get at is check this out. I'm going to take you to current day Google Maps 2025. It's not even done. They're just in construction right now. So you're talking almost 10 years
Yeah.
from when they first saw this, like, hey, this looks good, to actually getting doors open for a California self-storage site. So you got to have capital, you got to have the long game, you got to be patient if you're going to build in California.
I love that. And I think we talked a little bit a couple weeks ago about the disparity in tertiary market builds versus primary market, where there were more self-storage developments in tertiary markets for a few years. We're going to see that swing a lot. Of the 500 and some that are under construction right now, again, predominantly in top 50 MSAs. And I think that's going to be wildly important. I think you're going to see some pain in those tertiary markets, but the people who have the resources, the willingness, the grit to be willing to wait for 10 years. Because here's what we know about that facility. When those doors open, the rates are going to be fantastic.
Yes.
That's the upside of that entitlement challenge. The harder it is to build there, the less you're going to have, the less saturation you're going to get, the more you're going to be able to drive rates, which is going to be a fantastic long run for Trojan. How many people are willing to wait 10 years to see their return? Not many. And kudos to that whole team, because they're top of the food chain as far as it goes in self-storage development. I want to show you something when you get done. I'll let
Hold
you
on
finish.
one second, because
Go ahead.
I want to wrap this up as being your AI storage guy. That I just want people to sort of process that I saw the site, went to ChatGPT, did deep research, put the address in, and I want people to digest and appreciate what just happened here. I did that. Deep research does its work while I go grab a cup of coffee or search on other sites or whatever, and look at what this thing kicks out.
Right.
Like, just appreciate it's got links, man. Or if I actually want to go to articles, if I want to go to the city planning docs and see, like, it just lays it out. And it would take me days to do this in the past, right? I mean, literally days. And this thing kicks it out within a matter of, I don't know what it was, maybe 20, 30 minutes. The point being, I'm going out and doing other stuff while my Chat GTP agent is getting me all this content and info.
It's so interesting you say that. It's a conversation I've been having a lot lately. People are all worried about AI taking your job. AI is not going to take your job. Someone utilizing AI well is going to replace your job, right? It's not going to be AI that takes over for you. It's going to be the people like you who know how to utilize it and can maximize their time use because of that supplemental work that are going to really replace the people. Listen, get on board, because the ship's sailing and it's moving fast.
Amen. Amen. So it's kind of a shameless plug. If you need help with your storage and AI, hit me up, and happy to have that conversation with you, because it's just incredible what it can go out and do. So just want to say thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Thad, for doing this while you're in Denver. I know you probably could be doing some other things, so appreciate your insight and intel as always, man.
I want to finish very quickly. I'm going to share a quick story from Steve Ross, who I've talked about a couple times. Steve is getting deposed in August on a lawsuit currently going through the court system in Maryland. Thought this is really applicable for everyone that's involved in self-storage. Hobby Lobby is suing the owner of a self-storage facility currently managed by Extra Space in Maryland. It's in a converted shopping center. Hobby Lobby is next door. Hobby Lobby is suing to get this storage facility removed from the commercial retail space. And the premise of the lawsuit is that self-storage is not retail and thus shouldn't be allowed to be in this space. Ironically, the store's been open for 4 years and they got the zoning approval they needed to go there. Hobby Lobby, for some reason, still thinks that they should sue here and create a lawsuit. What's really interesting, Steve is being called in as a storage expert to help prove that self-storage is in fact a retail asset. And what the defense is trying to do in this case is get self-storage in Maryland classified as a retail asset, which is going to have amazing ramifications if it actually happens. If the defense wins and the state of Maryland now classifies self-storage as a retail asset, it opens the door to really change the locations that self-storage is allowed in, right? A lot of times now in various municipalities around the country, you're really restricted to finding an industrial or a mixed use type of a zoning that allows for self-storage to be built. So keeping an eye on that case and has a chance to have a monumental effect on how self-storage is viewed from, the city level, the community level, the planning and zoning level going forward.
So is Hobby Lobby doing that because they want a neighbor that's going to drive more foot traffic? Or I don't even know why they would file the case.
Yeah, I think that has to be a big deal of it. And again, but goes to your point earlier about millennials and Gen Z. If you have 870 storage units and, a millennial is going to their unit at least once a month, you've got 20, 30 people going into that storage facility every day. Storage is starting to have a higher foot count. Of course, it's not the same as if you had a Jersey Mike's next door, right? Like, obviously from a retail perspective, that's a better deal. The alternative of that is, would you rather have an empty space next door? Because that's what we're seeing in a lot of retail around the country. And self-storage has been a really good offset to that, able to go fill a lot of those spaces in a way that at least keeps the space full, right? If I'm Hobby Lobby, yeah, I'd rather have more foot traffic, but what's the detrimental effect of an empty building? You ever driven by a retail center that's 60, 70% empty? It's an eerie feeling.
If I'm Hobby Lobby, maybe I'm trying to kind of speak to my, Etsy entrepreneurs and go, hey, there's a storage place right next door. You can go put your Etsy stuff. I did just
Create
a thought,
foot
right?
traffic.
So,
Well, Chris, you
uh,
mentioned I'm in Colorado. I'm going to have lunch with the S3 team for my second to last day here. So I want to try and wrap this up. But again, I want to just say thank you for this. Has been such a joy to do this show. Really excited to have Tract IQ and their team on board with us as data partners, but even more excited to have gotten to know you better. It was awesome to be able to break bread in person and get to see each other live for the second time. Certainly a far deeper relationship now than we met at ISS in April in person. So really appreciate you and thanks so much for the ability to come and do this show.
I love it, man. So thank you guys. Please share this video with friends and family, colleagues in the business if you feel like you're getting some value out of it. And as always, if there's things you want us to discuss or have some suggestions for us, please let us know. We're always looking to make this better for you. So I'm Chris Berg, Thaddeus Campbell. Have a blessed weekend. We'll see you back here next week.